Hello everybody, welcome to part 2 of my Let's Make series. We're doing a Straitjacket here. And unfortunately right now this is an audio dub over the original audio because I sounded like fucking Jigsaw when I made this. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to say though that I am listening to the audio feed of the original video while I am also recording, so if anything sounds really weird, okay. So, in the first video we showed you how to make the arm straps. As you can see here, we've got the arm straps. We also have the front of the jacket that we made in part 1, the pattern making. And the only bad thing about cutting stuff on a roll is the fact that the stuff on the roll will eventually just roll up. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take it, roll it flat, and then roll it the exact opposite way. And after only a couple of minutes, it'll start to lay flat again, flat enough for you to put weights on it, and flat enough for you to actually have it sit on your fabric. Do this with all your pieces you've cut out of this brown cardboard fabric stuff. Sorry, not brown cardboard fabric. It's not brown cardboard fabric. What it is it's a paper bag type material. It's a thick paper stock that, like I said in my other videos, it's about $9.99 a roll, and you get a bunch of it. You can make a ton of patterns. So, after you roll those up, you just want to set something heavy on top of them, not to flatten them, maybe a pillow. Pillow would probably be your best bet. So, now we grab our black denim, fold that out. The denim right here is a heavy grade, is probably 8 or 10 ounce for straitjackets. You do want to use a heavier weight, even though all the straps are going to take the abuse, but it's also good to have a heavy jacket so it lasts long and will perform well. Unfold it out, make sure everything on there is flat. You need a nice flat surface to work on. Work on that, and go ahead and mark everything out easy, make sure it's straight. You can also run over it with an iron. An iron would be really good just to get rid of some of those wrinkles. Our white pencil. This is critical because we're going to be marking on there. That will wash off. You can mark on the fabric. You can see it great. I recommend buying a black and a white one, so you could use the black one on a lighter fabric and the white one on darker fabric like grays and blacks and dark blue. It just shows up a lot better. You could also buy some chalk that's about that big, about the size of a $half coin, and it's seamstress chalk. But I like to use a pencil because it's a lot better. Take your pattern. That one is the back. We're not going to use that one right now. And as you can see, in about a minute, the paper's already kind of flattened out enough so that we can lay it down and use it real nice. So let's go ahead and grab the front one and place it down on the paper. And since it's not in half, we're not going to have the two patterns, so you don't have to make two pieces. You only have to make one front side. This is going to make it a lot easier. You'll have to do a lot less sewing. Just go ahead and put some weights down on your paper, get it nice and flat, make sure that all the edges, there's no wrinkles in the paper's not folded over in half, and go ahead and just weigh it down with pennies, lighters, extra limbs you have laying around in your freezer, just something to keep the paper from moving. So, now you see, you can go and just draw along the side of the pattern, but problem is that is going to wind up being it's going to distract you from your seam allowances. So you can draw around the side, but you also have to remember that you have to leave enough space around the side of your fabric for your seam allowances. When you sew things together, you're going to wind up making the fabric a little bit smaller. So you have to make sure that there is a lot of extra fabric, probably about half an inch, 3/8 of an inch, if you can sew really tight seams. But half an inch is great because that's about how wide a presser fit is on a sewing machine. So by creating a seam allowance, you're going to keep the jacket body close to or a tiny bit bigger than the original size that it is. But on your sewing machines, on the presser foot, if you take a look at them, a lot of times they are marked off for half an inch, for 3/8 of an inch, 5/8, or 77/32, whatever the hell they have. Even though they don't have numbers on there, usually down at the presser foot on the metal plate, they have lines clearly marked out so that you can take and make sure that you're sewing with the edge of the fabric on those lines and have equal seams all the way around the body. And if you were someone else, you want to take some different measurements, maybe make the jacket body a little bit tighter, you can do your measurements across on the chest, measure it, make sure, and then if you're a little bit smaller around the waist, what you can do is wind up taking and measuring the waist a little bit smaller. Then instead of making the thing a whole big square, you can wind up taking your marker, you make a little indent in the side to have the jacket conform more to your body shape if you have a thinner torso. This is great because you can do a lot of things. You can make it big at the top for women or barrel-chested men. You can make it bigger around the stomach area if you wind up looking like the Michelin Man. So it's really good when you learn how to pattern draft. And all it is just measuring and marking. And I usually use half an inch for my seam allowances. So you can mark out a half an inch on the pattern you have on the fabric. But a good thing to do would probably be to just mark out the original pattern straight on the fabric, no seam allowances yet, but make sure you have about half an inch on either side. But you have to watch where you put your paper on the fabric. So keep enough space between the fabric and the side of the paper to add at least half an inch. Now what I'm doing here is I am marking around the entire thing, around the original pattern, no seam allowances yet. You can go through afterwards and take a measuring tape and measure out half an inch from there. Half an inch is a great number. It's nice and round, and you can actually work with it a lot better instead of having to remember 7/8 or 3/8 or 5/16, whatever stupid small measurement you get if you break it down to. Half an inch is great, and like I've said, you can always go and you can always go and sew in more, but it's a pain in the ass if you actually have to add more, because on a particular thing where some of the strength of a jacket, some, not all, is actually in some of the fabric. But the fabric body is just a place to hold the straps. But we only need one piece for this since we're only having one front. So you just take your pattern, use one piece of fabric for your front chest piece, and it'll work out a lot better. You have less sewing. Now, just go around, mark your edges exactly where the paper lays onto your fabric. This is probably going to be the best thing to do so that you know here's the original size, but you always have to keep in mind you have to measure out half an inch seam allowance, half an inch seam allowance. Because I've screwed up a bunch of fursuits like that where the size actually turned out all right because in my pattern I added on a little bit and didn't technically need to add the seam allowance, but it worked out fine. So make sure you have your seam allowances. And now that we've traced around everything, you can see on the fabric right there, everything's all marked out. So there you go. All the markings are good, and you can lay it down, double check. Also, you could also take the front of the straitjacket pattern, and you could put it in a box. You could put it in a folder. You could put it somewhere where if you want to make another one for yourself, a different style, whatever, you can just toss it in a box. But just remember that because you have this, you can also transfer it onto another piece of paper to make a second one if you want to cut designs up. So we're just going to put that in the save pile, well, actually on the floor. Half an inch seam allowance. So we need to add half an inch to this. So take your little measuring tape, and you can measure out yourself half an inch here, half an inch there, everywhere you need half an inch. But I've made a lot of these. I know about what half an inch is, so I'm just going to eyeball it from here and trace the patterns half an inch around itself. So this actually turns out to be, I have to sharpen the pencil. That's right, because those pencils I bought, they're a little bit bigger than a regular number 2 pencil. So you have to manually sharpen them using a sharp knife or a razor. And when you're sharpening something like that, you always cut away, because if you miss and, well, not miss, but if it skips off or cuts off too fast, the knife's going to come straight at you if you cut towards you. So you always cut away and push with your thumb. So if the blade flips out and goes off into space, it goes off into space without lobbing someone's head off. So let's blow that shit away. We'll continue doing that with our nice sharp edge. So just add your 1/2 inch all the way around the fabric. And make sure you do this all the way around. And probably because of the length of these videos, I'm going to get people who are going to tell me, well, cut them down, condense them, cut them down, condense them. But I don't want to cut them down, because there's enough video montages of nothing but pictures set up in Windows Movie Maker, where they just set the picture every 5 seconds and then add some text. This is an actual hands-on video of start to finish making a straitjacket, so that there's no need for someone to ask a question. There's no need for someone to, okay, well, what do you use here? What do you use here? What do you use here? No, I'm showing you from start to finish the entire process of how I make a straitjacket. And I've made, it's probably getting up to in the tens right now. So I know how to make them. I have yet to have anybody say they broke a strap, they ripped the fabric, because nobody's ever said they broke anything. But this is what I've done a bunch of times. So we've added 1/2 inch around here, but what I want to point out is that I am adding another 2.5 inches to the bottom, because, like I've said, it's always good to have to reduce how much fabric you have on there and not add more. Because if you have to add more, it's going to be a pain in the ass, especially on a fabric like this. It's going to be incredibly hard to hide. So if you think it's a little bit short or doesn't look right, just add a little bit more on. So you can add in a safety. So make an extra 2 inches on the bottom, and you also have to remember you have to make another 2 inches on the back. Now we're going to cut this out. Now, it's a good thing to have is a pair of titanium tip scissors. The scissors I have in here, this video, they're kind of crap, because I have literally cut so many fursuits with these, so much fabric, webbing, everything, that the titanium on there has actually started to wear off. And well, you're thinking, oh, well, it's titanium, it's nice and tough. Well, eventually, with enough wear, because this fabric is really tough, but a weakness of this fabric is eventually the threads on there, if the seam is exposed, the threads can pull out, which I'm going to show you later on in the sewing portion of the video, that there's a way to cover your seams so that they're not going to fray, so that you won't wind up with punching a hole in the side because the thread frays enough on the actual fabric that it compromises the seam. Because if you actually take a look at a real straitjacket, they do actually have all the seams on the jacket. If it's a vital seam, a body seam, they are actually covered with a... that's the reason I bought the 1 inch wide webbing, so that 1 inch wide cotton webbing, so that I could go and sew that over the seams, so that anywhere the body will contact it, down the arm sleeves, down the sides of the jacket where it sews together, so that it does not fray and fall apart. Now, I've seen a lot of designs and heard people that use a t-shirt. Find a t-shirt that fits, cut it apart, make the arms or whatever, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. The t-shirt might be too small. They always forget about seam allowances, so the method I'm using here, where you measure around your torso and you measure several other places, I will link in the video description, and probably at the end of the video have a link to the measurement sheet. So Eventually, when we get to the sewing portion, I'll show you all the buckles and the D-rings that are going to be going on this, and I will link in the next video where I get them. Problem with the buckles is they're extremely hard to find. The one place I found that sold them, you have to have a minimum order, and it's, I think they're like $1 or $2 a buckle, which isn't that bad. But the problem is you have to order, I think, $40 worth of crap. But the site is great. They've got lots of stuff on there that you can buy. They've got D-rings. They've got clips, stuff like that. You can spend a lot of money there just to boost up and make sure that you get your $40 worth before you order. But the buckles that I use on all my jackets are exactly what Posse uses. Not the exact size, but it's the exact same friction type of buckle. When I get into the sewing portion of this, I'm going to show you everything, give you some nice videos, and let you see what they are. I'll even pull out my Posse and show you that the buckle style is the same. Now, for fabric here, I probably should have done this earlier in the video, but it's great working with 60 inches wide of fabric because you can do a whole top of it within 1 yard of fabric. You also want to make sure that your fabric is nice and straight when you cut it, because you can see here you got some buckles there, and if you let those buckles go, they can get kind of in the way. If they fold over enough, they could actually make your pattern bigger or smaller. But you could also iron it out. Here's the back of the jacket right here. And you can see here we have the center line, and then we have the marking off to one side. So, since jackets don't zip up, they don't button up, they close in the back with buckles. You could probably add some Velcro. I did that on one, but it got in the way. So, you have to have two flaps of the back of the jacket overlap to cover the entire upper torso, because otherwise it looks messy, like the jacket's incomplete. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to chop down, cut on my dotted line, and eventually I'm going to wind up throwing away that extra piece of fabric. Sorry, the extra piece of paper. Why am I doing that? Because we can make two sides out of the bigger side. We can make two bigger sides, and when you overlap that, it'll wind up with a 4 to 5 inch overlap in the back, which is great, which is what you need. That's how straitjackets are made themselves. Now, bigger piece is a lot bigger than the other one, so we can just throw the other side out and make two big pieces to create a decent overlap. So I'm just saying in the video that I'm going to toss out that half. So let's just put it in our throwaway pile that's on the floor. And we're going to make two bigger pieces so we have a decent amount of overlap. And pieces are going to overlap about 4 inches in the back. We're going to do the exact same thing as we did at the front half. We're going to weigh it down with our miscellaneous items, our limbs, maybe a giant adult toy you have laying around that actually might have some good weight to it. So take our pen again, we're going to trace around there, and remember, seam allowances. You need seam allowances. So if you're going to be copying right off the paper, make sure you have enough space between the paper and what actually is on the fabric. So you can add half an inch of seam allowance all the way around. So we're just going to mark it like that. We're going to do the same thing, and the same thing as the front, and seam allowances. I'm saying seam allowances a lot because you need those. It's going to wind up too small. It's going to wind up not fitting. Now, a very, very tight straitjacket is great. You can barely move in it, but the problem is with a very, very tight straitjacket is it can start cutting off circulation. So we want enough space in the jacket so that you're comfortable in it for long lengths of time. Instead of having it really, really tight and inescapable, you can make it a little bit loose, and if you make the torso snug enough under the arms, it's still inescapable because, quite frankly, unless you're the Hulk, you're not going to break out of one of these jackets. Or any correctly made straitjacket for that matter. So, If you have it if you have it tied around the torso, the chest area, you're not going to be able to pull your arms out, which that is one of the things it's not that a straitjacket allows you not to do. It allows you not to use your hands, not to use your arms. So, and we're also going to add in another 2.5 inches down at the bottom because we added 2.5 inches in the front. It's kind of like fractions. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Oh wow, that sounded oddly sexual. So, here's what we're going to wind up doing. We've got everything already cut out and back portions already spread out on there. Now, if you have to make sure that the fabric doesn't have a face side. There's no right or wrong side in this on this fabric, so it's really easy to mistake it. With fur, if you have fur on it, then you obviously know the fur side goes out. But a lot of times you have to look at a fabric and say, okay, which side is the face outside? So if you had a pattern that had flowers or dead hippies on it or something, you can actually go and if you make it wrong, you can make it backwards. You have to make sure that wherever your patterns are facing, that you have two opposite sides, because that side will sit right or left depending on which side the face fabric is on. And you have to do a little bit of thinking. But you don't have to think about this with the denim. There's usually no direction in denim except for up and down. You don't have to worry about the back being different from the front. It's just all one uniform type of fabric. So for the back, you cannot cut the back in one segment like we did with the front. You have to have it closed in the back like a wraparound jacket. Ooh, excuse me, wraparound jacket. And remember your seam allowances again. Add a 1/2 inch. And in the sewing video, I will be talking about the thread and what all you need for the thread. So, and you've noticed here that I've left enough seam on between the pattern piece and the fabric so that we can mark off. So we can mark off exactly what we need and have very little waste. Even though the fabric I have in here, I'm going to have probably fabric square footage, I'm going to have probably 1.5 yards left. But the way the fabric is cut, because everything is cut down long ways, it's good to overestimate the amount of fabric you need. Best not to have to wait a day or something to get another yard of fabric or anything like that. And for denim, I recommend that you do not order denim over the internet. If you order denim over the internet, it's going to turn out to be really, you just don't know what kind of quality you're going to get. I'm going to have to go ahead and pause this here. Okay, so the video cut out. I had to open it in a new player, but video's playing fine again. I'm actually watching it and listening to it. The audio actually cut out. I was recording this on my laptop, but oh wow, I have no audio direction. I'm fucking flailing up here. So, because we added 4 inches in the front, we have to add 4 inches in the back. So now we're going to go ahead and, because both of the back sides are equal, we're just going to go ahead and cut a line across the bottom, fold that fabric in half. Once we fold it in half, we're going to cut through 2 layers at once. You know, kill 2 stones with 1 bird, and cut out both of the back sides. Now, that ripple right by the scissors a little bit, about 5 inches above it, I'm going to need to watch that, because that starts pissing me off after a while. Now, fold it in half, and you have to make sure that your fabric is lined up correctly, so that when you cut both pieces, you're cutting both pieces at an equal size. Make sure there's no ripples in the back. Make sure your edges are lined up, maybe a little bit of overlap, because I wound up with cutting 2 pieces of fabric once, and there was a cut in the bottom. So it wound up I had to cut another piece of fabric. So just make sure that both your fabric layers, when they're stacked on top of each other, it goes really nice. So hopefully the audio is synced up with this, but I'm just going to go ahead and cut both of these out, and it's also a good idea to, when you cut these out, make sure everything's on a flat surface. Otherwise you'll wind up with 2 different size pieces. It might be off 1/2 inch, it might be off 1 inch. So It doesn't necessarily matter if you've got it off too much, but you will notice it on certain things. So just make sure all your fabric is flat as you're cutting it out. So make sure your edges are still lining up. It's best not to move the fabric as much. And actually, I think if you would take like a silicone pot holder or something and put it between the two pieces, they wouldn't move as much. It gives it a lot of friction, so the two tops of the fabric won't move over each other like different plates, because you want both the pieces of fabric to stay exactly how they are. Remember, we also had some extra on the bottom. What you do to one side, you got to do to the other. So once this gets cut out, we're going to move on to the sleeves. Wow, recording this without any sort of audio help from the original track is just fucking amazing. No, my laptop can't handle that. It's an old HP TC4200. Yeah, it's a really old touchscreen laptop. It does Photoshop and SAI really well. Other than that, it's slow when it browses the internet. It's even though I upgraded to 2 gig of RAM, it's puttering along. And I would hate to see the day that when that laptop finally dies, because I have to probably find out what's wrong with it, try and get a replacement part. If not, I have to drop $2,000 on another touchscreen laptop. But I just love the thing. Anything digital I've done, anything in Photoshop, really everything I've scanned in, all my art winds up going through that computer. So I would be lost without it. Alrighty then. So what are we doing here? We're waving our hands. Oh, another thing too is whenever you're making your fabric, you always make sure you mark it front, top, back, whichever piece, just in a little inconspicuous area. But this pen washes off easily, so I'm just marking on it. Another good thing to remember too is whenever you're cutting your fabric, to put it somewhere where you have no capability of grabbing it and saying, oh, hey, look, a piece of fabric, I can use this to cut out a pattern. Make sure your fabric is away from your fabric pile, because there's been multiple times when I've grabbed a piece right before I make a cut on it, I wind up going, oh crap, this is a pattern piece I already cut out. I would have ruined that son of a bitch if I hadn't put it over somewhere safe, like over there, where you know you're not going to grab it by accident. You wind up grabbing a piece of pattern you already cut, you're going to end up cutting that shit up, and you don't want to do that. You'll go through a little bit more fabric than you plan to, which is why it's always great to order more. So put that in the let's save it / trash pile on the floor. And fabric scraps, you can just toss those out since there's really no reason to keep those around. And at this point, I grabbed the receipt, and I had gotten a total of 3 yards of the black denim. Now, if you laid everything out end to end, you'd only need about 2.5 yards, but it's always great to have more in case you screw something up. Fabric selection is important. I believe I mentioned earlier on in the video that if you order stuff online, you don't know what you're getting. You may be paying $15 for some high quality denim, you get it and it's something that's just really, really trash. So always go to a fabric store, make sure you know what you're getting, and just feel the fabric. You'll be able to feel cheap fabric. Cheap fabrics are light and they stretch easy and they just look like garbage. Heavier fabrics are a lot better. And the only way to judge heavy fabric is to actually go to the fabric store itself and make sure everything you've got is a little bit more than what you need, because you don't want to wind up measuring out less than what you need or more than what you don't want to wind up measuring less than what you need. Nothing is more of a pain in the ass than starting a project and finding out you need an extra yard or two. If it's with fur, always make sure you order more. Same thing with the denim stuff. Make sure you buy more, because you don't want to run out and have to run the risk of they don't have it anymore. You spend half a day running around town. And the way to judge a good fabric is you can pull it and see if it has any stretch. Pull it long ways, pull it short ways, and then also just pick it up and feel it. If a little bit of the fabric is heavy, then you know it's pretty much a good dense heavy fabric. But as I've said before, I believe this was an 8-ounce denim. Now I don't use canvas because a lot of the canvas I've run into, straitjackets are Posse makes them with 10-ounce canvas. Problem is, all the canvas you can buy at the stores is cheap stuff. It's really, really cheap. The denim is actually better quality. It's thicker woven. It's a lot heavier. So make sure you know what you're getting and use only good quality stuff. Otherwise, it's going to look like junk. Don't use t-shirt material. Don't use this or that. If you want to make an honest to God straitjacket, get some good denim and get some good webbing and drop some money on it, because I do believe at $9 a yard for that fabric, I've spent a total of $50 on fabric, and the buckles and everything alone is probably close to another almost $50 in buckles and D-rings and webbing. So when you lay out and you're cutting two pieces out at once, like this arm sleeve right here, you're going to wind up wanting to make sure that when you cut it, you're going to have enough fabric on the top and enough fabric on the bottom. Also for seam allowances, because you don't want to wind up cutting something wrong and having to cut it again. If you have to, you've hopefully followed my advice and gotten more fabric. You can get more fabric, so if you do screw up, it's not a big deal. But if you just think twice and then think 3 times about what you're doing before you make an actual cut, you can save yourself a lot of time, because I've screwed up a bunch of different stuff doing that. But luckily, I'd ordered more fabric, so it wasn't a big deal. Now, this sleeve design right here may look extremely odd, but actually I have, with my straitjacket, I didn't take it apart, I just laid it out and looked at it for a bit, and I came to the determination that the straitjacket sleeve, when it's unfolded and unsewed, does look like that. So right now we're just folding it in half, making sure all our sides are symmetrical, but as you can see right there, where my right hand is, pointing at it right now, that it is actually not going to, it's not actually equal. So what we're going to do is just when we put this on the fabric, I'm going to write down on the piece of paper that I need to plus sign, need to add fabric. Right there and right there, just to make it symmetrical. Lay it down, weight it down with your extra body parts, and make sure it doesn't move. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing with this measuring tape. Okay. So what I'm doing there was I was just saying that if we laid out all the fabric end to end, you would only need about 2.5 yards. But I got 3 just because, well, fuck, if I ever needed any more, I'd be pretty much screwed on that. I'd have to go out and buy some more, and then I just wasted probably $10 in fabric. Come on, damn it, get to some action. I need to find some, like, TGA files or whatever that are explosion, just add them randomly in here. Making straitjackets is awesome. No, that would be kind of funny. That'd be too horrible. Lay it out and make sure your fabric is flat too. When you're working with 2 sides of fabric at once, you want to make sure that the bottom piece does not kerfuffle up or rumple. If it does that, then you're going to wind up cutting out an oddly shaped piece, and it may not sew together right. And right here, I've added on to what I need to add some more. And we're just doing it again where we trace around the original pattern, and then we add in seam allowances. If there's one thing you get from this video, it's seam allowances. Now we're pointing here, and we're pointing here. If I point over there, it might be funnier. But you see the line running down the center? That's a line running down the center. Actually, what you could do is, since this is one whole sleeve and it's measured out to be a sleeve, you could literally use the center line that you've marked and fold it in half to make sure that both sides are symmetrical. Fold it in half, mark out where the center is on the fabric, and then just literally just turn just flip the fabric over to make the other side. But I've wound up with problems doing that. It's best to just lay it out flat. You can always take your measurements and remeasure twice, because until you cut the fabric, you're just working with paper, and you can make more patterns if you buy a big roll, or you could go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of crap. But see, here's the half and half pattern. As you can see, it works, but you have to be really careful about when you flip it over that you don't move the center line at all. So, okay, what I was explaining there is I'm going to be adding a purple strap down the center. I'm not going to show that. I'm going to cut that out and probably have it sewed on the outside of the sleeve. I'll show you sewing it, but not cutting out, because that's all extra stuff. For the extra stuff, if you want to add markings on there, so you want to add an elbow patch or something, what you need to do is you can butcher your original pattern, or you can if the, or you can transfer the pattern onto another piece of that cardboard paper, draw your pattern on there, and then cut that out so you don't sacrifice your original pattern. But I can make these patterns for fursuits, for straitjackets, for muzzles and hoods for fursuit heads on the fly, so I don't need to keep anything around. All I need is measuring tape and some marking material and the measurements. So what are we doing here, kids? Seam allowances. Oh, God. That just brings back horrible memories of all these kids shows. Hey, kids, where's the dildo? Oh, it's in your ass. No, it's not. Oh, that was horrible. Okay, so probably another good idea to do would be to add a little bit more on the bottom of the sleeve so that you have extra, because what is on the bottom of the sleeve is not going to be it can be extra. You can cut that off if you need to. But adding more onto the bottom of the sleeve like that is going to be a no-go. It's not going to be any good. So what we're doing here is I was explaining that on the bolts of fabric, you can look on it and sometimes it'll say 6 ounce or 8 ounce or 10 ounce per yard, whichever. Sometimes it's on the bolts of fabric by the barcode. Sometimes it's not. You just have to look, and if you're lucky, it'll tell you. If you're not lucky, you just have to kind of feel the weight of the fabric and just make sure that it's a pretty good weight of fabric to begin with. You could probably use a bunch of 6 ounce or lightweight fabric. You'd have to double it up or maybe back it with spandex, but that just adds double to your cutting time, because usually I found that if you wind up cutting more fabric in a pile, that also increases the chance for one of your patterns to become off. And if one of your patterns becomes off, you have to make a call and say this is not going to affect the design, or you have to make a call and say, okay, I need to cut more out, which is why you order more fabric than you need. I want to stress that too. Seam allowances and more fabric. It's always nice to get an extra yard of fabric. That way it gives you okay, I fucked up, and I don't have to go back to the store because I have extra. It's always great. So, and another thing, like I said before, you want to watch is for fabric shifting under the bottom and little bumps or kerfuffles or whatever with the fabric on the bottom, because you can't see it gets ruffled. You just want to run your hands over it and make sure there's no bumps or lumps or anything in there. Okay, now I'm pointing at it, and I'm making a circle with my hand. Oh, that's where the strap goes. Now, I said before we want to make the arm sleeve a little bit longer, so when you fold it over and you sew the strap on there, you fold it over, you can sew the strap on there so it has lots of strength, so you can't bust out of it. Which, if you do this right and you have a decent sewing machine, you're going to wind up not needing anything. Sorry, you're going to wind up with a really, really strong jacket. There's going to be no way you're going to be able to bust out of there. So we're doing a little bit of cutting. And while we're doing that, oh, everything is sore. I really do need more light in my room. Okay, and then seam allowances. And we are actually getting close towards the end of the movie. We have 1 minute left. I'm going to make sure this audio syncs up with this. We have 40 minutes and 35 seconds, and on the counter we have 40:38. So we're going to have to cut some stuff off. But we're getting close to the end right now, and we have cut out both arms, the back panels, the front panel, and we are getting really close to assembly, which will be in the next video. Probably for the next video I'm going to dub it over as well. Or I'll probably just have the headset on and record it while I'm recording the video. So, thank you guys for watching, and okay, I'm just saying that I'm going to be cutting out this piece of paper to create an actual some markings that go on the front. I'll show you sewing the markings on. I'm not going to show you sewing the not going to show you cutting them out. But alright, and thank you for watching.